in The Pursuit of Truth. Dowley, Episode 7, Chapter 4, Doubt. Descartes said, "All is to be doubted." Dr. had a fresh memory of his first childhood experience with a train on the way to a summer camp. The train was at the full stop in the station. Then the siren sounded, and he heard the rhythmically clicking sound of the wheels passing over the gaps of the rails. He perceived it was his train moving. But moments later, he was surprised to find that the office of the train station was still there, and his train was still in standstill. What moved was the train on the next track. To make a correct observation, you need a right reference point. For a long time during the 50s and the 60s, what looked to Westerners as obvious was not so clear in the eyes of the Chinese. In a closed society, Chinese did not have the benefit of free flow of information or the opportunity to travel abroad, and therefore they lacked a necessary point of reference in their minds for direct comparison. But did it mean people had to be misled? Was there another way to get closer to the truth? In the first year to his junior high, Dr. began to show interest in the conversations among his friends who were seniors. He was no longer just a mischievous boy who was eager to outshine others, but a young man anxious to understand those things mentioned in their discussions. Things that sounded so abstract and unfathomable, yet fascinating and profound. It was a group discussion of senior high students, JL among them, on the subjects being taught at school. They talked about the Marxist philosophy of materialism, that man's social being determines his consciousness. They talked about dialectics of the unity of the opposite. They mentioned German philosophy, English political economy, and French utopian socialism. They talked about Hegel, Smith, and Fourier. For a 14-year-old 7th grader, the information was overwhelming. Dr. asked JL if he could use simple language to explain historical materialism. JL thought for a moment and then gave him words of Engels. Mankind must first of all eat, drink, have shelter and clothing, before it can pursue politics, science, art, religion, etc. That is not so difficult to understand. It piqued Dr's interest, and he felt he would like to know more. But further acquisition of such knowledge did not catch on until years later. Soon Dr. went to a prestigious high school. The science and math curricula became his focal point. Dr. revered Isaac Newton and thought he was the greatest scientist of all time. Newton developed a systematic theory of mechanics empowered by precise calculations. Aviation and satellite are possible because of his theory. Dr. was intrigued by the story of Mendeleev, who, while playing with cards, suddenly realized that the property of chemical elements appeared periodically according to their weights. He was also fascinated by the Archimedes' bathtub finding of the principle of buoyancy and Galileo's dropping ball experiment from the Leaning Tower in Pisa to study gravity. He could have stayed on that course, focused on certain science subjects, and became an expert in certain area in the future to lead an interesting life and make a decent living. Practically, this was the best his parents could hope for him under the circumstances. The early enlightenment about the philosophical world would have remained only as his intellectual curiosity, if not for a hard push that followed in real life. He did not want to touch politics, but politics found him. The political line between the students sitting in the same classroom had always existed in the school as far as DR could remember. But at first, it looked quite innocent. The political figures among the students were mostly members of the Communist Youth League. Many of them were model students who studied hard, behaved well, helped others, and organized a variety of extracurricular activities. In front of their fellow students, they had the image of good public servants. The average students, on the other hand, were expected and urged to toe the party's political line, but it was the students' own conduct and performance that really counted. One student was the equal of the other. As DR entered the senior years of high school, the political atmosphere turned menacing, and the family political background of students became the basis of discrimination. Students from families deemed as politically unreliable were under tremendous political pressure to accept the notion that they were by nature untrustworthy. On the other side of the invisible wall were those from politically loyal and faithful families of communist cadres, factory workers, and poor peasants at the time of the communist takeover. DR found JL to tell what was bothering him. I have friends from working-class families and see some good characters in them, but I could not understand the extreme indoctrination that somehow students of other family background are inherently problematic and politically inferior. I do not think this kind of division serves any good purpose, and wonder why they are doing this. JL could tell that DR had become more mature, just like what he himself experienced a few years before. Ninth grade appeared to be a pivot point in people's lives. That thought just passed through JL's mind. He said to DR, "Most people just dislike the idea but try to ignore it. You seem to be more concerned about the reason." Correct. I think I have some argument against it. Such as, family backgrounds could not be students' own choosing. This seemed to be against the basic Marxist philosophy of materialism. Ideology and character did not come from mothers' wombs. I see your point, but most of the time they did not actually draw their policies from their claimed philosophy. Instead, their policy is directly from their doctrine of classist struggle. They look at human nature through the prism of classes. What is human nature? This has been a question since ancient times. More than 2,000 years ago, during the Warring States period in Chinese history, two legendary Chinese philosophers, laid out their views on this subject. According to Mencius, human nature is good because everyone has a heart that is sensitive to the sufferings of others, and the people have the capacity to learn good behavior. Xunzi disagreed. He believed that human nature is bad. People are born with an inclination of being selfish. This led Dr. to Liu's book Men's Class Character. Liu played second fiddle to Mao until he was ousted from his post during the Cultural Revolution. According to him, there is no such thing as human nature. He wrote that in a class society, men's class character forms the very nature and substance of man. Dr. felt intuitively that something did not jibe in Liu's argument. If human origin preceded the birth of classes, how come the class character became a nature? It was like putting the cart before the horse. When Dr. got a hold of Mao's analysis of the classes in Chinese society, his eyes lit up. Mao said the working class has been deprived of all means of production, have nothing to left but their hands, and have no hope of ever becoming rich. Dr. went to jail to point out the inconsistency and the contradiction. We are being repeatedly educated that self-interest is by nature a bourgeois characteristic. But even Mao admitted in his early writing that capitalists were not the only ones who wanted to become rich. The working class does too. Therefore, wanting to fare well economically is part of the human nature. Of course, for some, the hope was realized, while for others, the hope was lost. But that is a different question that we should not be confused with. Please continue. Jiao listened with intense interest. Class characters are certain attributes of certain group of people under certain historical conditions. Class characters exist precisely because commonalities of human race. So you are saying that class characters are the derivatives of human nature, J.L. added. The train of thoughts seemed to gain new momentum. Dr. dusted off the pamphlet named Dialectical and Historical Materialism sitting on the family's bookshelf. It was under Stalin's name and circulated widely in early 1950s China. The book stated that human history started from a primitive, classless, communal system and evolved into the slave system, the feudal system, and then capitalist system. But how did it all happen? What was the driving force behind the changes? The school party leaders explained that as productivity improved, some people did not have to work to live, hence the origin of slave owners, landlords, and so on. But improved productivity only makes exploitation possible. It does not explain what actually motivates exploitation. You cannot blame money for the action of robbery, can you? It was clear that human nature had a dual character, with a dark side as well as a bright side. Neither Mencius nor Xunzi got the complete picture. But the communist class character theory seemed to make even less sense. It didn't hold water because it had some big holes in it. Whatever the theory is, a correct one has to be coherent and consistent. DR said to himself. And so the doubt lingered. The emphasis on family origin among students will inevitably challenge the school's mission, the transfer of knowledge. What happened in DR's high school? Please continue to listen to Chapter 5, Read an Expert.